So, g'day. Welcome to another episode of Frosty's Projects. I am your host, Frosty, and today I'm going to be installing a pet door in my daughter's bedroom door here. My adult daughter, Sabrina, has her own room. It's kind of like a standalone apartment. She has her own bathroom and such. She has a dog and a cat, and she likes to be able to lock her door for privacy, but she also wants her dog and her cat to be able to get in and out of her bedroom when she's not around. So we went online, we bought a product. I'll show it to you when we get this door out into the garage. It's a fairly simple installation. There's not a whole lot to it. You could actually probably install this with the door still swinging, but the amount of work involved in taking the door down and putting the door back up, balanced against how hard it would be to try to install this with the door swinging, isn't even it's a no-brainer. It's going to be far easier to take this door down and take it into the garage to do the work. So that's the way we're going to go about doing this. So, it only takes a handful of fairly basic tools to do this. So I'll have everything laid out in the garage when we get the door down. But in the meantime, let's get at it. So this door happens to be hanging on 3 hinges. It's not unusual for a residential door to be swinging on 2, just simply a top and a bottom. This one happens to be on 3. Each one of them has 3 screw holes per hinge where it attaches the hinge to the frame itself. Another option, if you didn't want to pull the screws out, would be to take a punch and you could drive the hinge pin up and out of this, so you could split the hinges in half. There's 2 different ways to go about it. I prefer to pull the screws out and drop it that way. Alright, so when you're taking the screws out, you can work from the top down and start in the middle. It really doesn't matter. I always prefer starting at the bottom and working my way up. No particular reason, just the way I like to go about it. Wow. Surprised this door's even still standing up. I don't know who swung this door. I know I did at one point. Somebody's obviously worked on it since I have. I'm going to leave one in the middle. We're going to have some repair work to do for these screw holes, which is a fairly easy repair. I'll show you how to do that when we go to reswing the door. That'll be a nice little bonus to the video. Let's go ahead and get this door upstairs out into the garage and get at it. All right, so here we are out in my garage. This is the door from Sabrina's room. This is the product I have here. It's from the Pet Shop 4-way locking pet door. This one is advertised for, what's it say? Doors and walls, overall size, cats and small dogs is what it's advertised for. So we've already run into a little bit of a challenge. So this particular door, because of where it's at in the basement, has ductwork that goes through the ceiling right above this door. And so when I replaced this door originally, whenever that was, a couple years ago, I had to cut 5 inches off the bottom of the door to get it to fit. That's why there's no rail at the bottom of this. You see it's just wide open. It's only got the rails on the ends. So I lost roughly 5 inches at the bottom to be able to locate the pet door. Ordinarily it would fit beautifully right here in the bottom stile. These are called the stiles of the door. It would fit very nicely because I'd have another 5 inches to play with. Unfortunately, I don't have that here with this particular style door. So we're going to have to do a little bit of creativity here to get this to fit. If I put it in the middle of the door, then I've got these 2 channels that I have to mess with. If I put it in the middle down here, I still have these to mess with. However, if I put it right here, it'll fit nicely in this bottom panel. And I think that's probably going to be our best location. So I'm going to roll with that. We could still have some challenges as we move forward and we start cutting this out, but I think it's probably our best location, the best our best option. The instructions that came with this are only what's printed on the back. This did not come with a paper template or anything. It doesn't have any kind of a booklet, just the instructions on the back of the package. And it says to measure the belly of your animal and use that as the height for the bottom of this opening. So that's going to be a little high for a cat and a chihuahua, but we have a doggy door that goes out of the back of our house out of our dining room and onto the back deck that the animals use without any problem. And it's about this high, so I think we'll be all right. It's a little taller than what the instructions indicate, but I think it'll work out well. So we'll go ahead and start trying to get this laid out, and we'll move forward. All right, so we've got the pet door fairly well centered up on this panel. If you flip this over and look, we've got this lip that comes around the inside perimeter of what's going to be the opening, and it's slightly taller than this. So this piece needs to fit down inside of the door. So we need to cut something slightly larger than this, but smaller than where these 4 screw holes are. So we lay this out and we center it on the panel so that it's going to sit down inside of this panel as well as possible. We'll get it centered up. Again, this would be nice if I had a template, a paper template, but I don't. I could make a paper template, but I'm just going to use this. So we're going to scribe this out. Okay, so now we've got it roughed out about where it needs to be, and remember we need to cut it slightly larger than that so that this lip will fit down inside of the door. So I'm going to grab some tape, we'll tape this out, get out the saw, and we'll start cutting. Alright, so I've got my opening taped out here. I went about 1/4 of an inch larger than what I'd lined out as the inside circumference of this, or inside perimeter, to give room for this to go in. We've got easily 1/4 of an inch to play with, so that should work out real well. I've got my Milwaukee saw, and I'm just going to plunge cut right along the edge of the green tape. With that cut, this piece should lift out. Feels like there's some styrofoam glued to it. The styrofoam block is part of the construction of the door. And exactly what I hoped would happen did. And that's my blade is long enough that I went through the other side of the door enough to mark out this perimeter. So now all I have to do is just finish 2 or 4 little corners here, and I'll be all the way through the door on both sides. We can take this, and it should sit down in there nice and neat, just like that. If I wanted to, I could flip this door over and continue with a skill saw to do this, but a handsaw will do nicely. You could also use a jigsaw if you had one. And there we go. Now the only challenge is going to be to get this top portion to sit flat like the rest of the door, or the rest of this pet door portion. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I've traced out the curve of the top of this pet door to match on the door where it's hitting the high part of this panel, and I'm going to cut this out so that it will sit down in there flush. Just like that. All right, we'll mirror that with our jigsaw. And now, with a little luck, and there we have it. Just like that. So we can now mark our 4 holes for the corners for the screws to go through, get those drilled out, and we'll be just about ready to start screwing this together. All right, and so one more thing we need to consider, because this is a hollow core residential door, there's nothing in the middle. It's just these 2 thin pieces of skin, and the only thing holding it apart are the rails on each end of the door, and then also the occasional piece of styrofoam. So as you can see, this door is very flexible, has very little structure in the middle where we just cut this big hole. So I'm going to take a 2x4, I'm going to rip it down and make a couple of small pieces to go here, 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 and here to put them on the inside. I'm going to glue them in there so when we screw the 2 halves of this together, they have something to pinch up against, and it'll create a little bit more rigidity right around this doggy door. It's a little bit of overkill, but not too much. It's a reasonable thing to do. So I've got my table saw set up behind me. I've got a 2x4 I'm going to rip down, and we'll start putting some strength back into this door. Okay, so we've got our 4 blocks cut, either side, top and bottom. Now, when these go in, they're probably going to be a little bit snug. When we screw this together, it's going to pinch it into place. I could just stick these in there and it'll probably be fine. But just to make sure we're doing things the right way, I'm going to go ahead and put a small bead of glue on each one of these before I put them in. So good. And then this one is just going to kind of float here in the middle because of how much wider the door is with this style, but this will give something for this to pinch down on when I put it together. Now this is the outside of the door based on the way the hinge direction is. So I want this to the inside, which is also going to be the side with the screws. So in order to install this, I'm going to flip the door over to make it easier to install the screws and get this put together. Alright, so we've got the door flipped over. We have the 2 halves of the doggy door here. This goes to the inside because it has the locking selector switch. So this is going to go here. Looks like we've got a little bit of a problem with our selector switch interfering with the door. We're going to have to carve something out for that, but my screw holes line up. Other than that, everything seems to fit the way it's supposed to. On the back side here, we've got the divided screws, and on the back side, this is where the nuts go, and those can be kind of hard to hold into place while you're trying to screw everything together. So I'm just going to take about these little guys down in the holes where they go. So they don't fall out while this is upside down underneath the door. Just put a little bit of piece of tape over them to kind of hold them in place. so. Now we need to figure out how we're going to make this little latch piece work. So with our screw holes lined up, I can see through the door to the screw holes. I can look down in here to where that tab is, so I know how large it is. Be at least there and there. And you need to come to at least this edge on the rail. So out of one side of the door, to cut this much more out. This is where it would have been nice to have a template provided by the manufacturer, because it would have had all these little notches and stuff pre-marked on it, so we wouldn't have run into this at this stage in the game. Also, that block I put in is going to be in the way, so I'm going to need to tap it further in.
Alright, I got it now. One of these. Roll this.
Okay. And there we have it. So we'll take this door and we'll put it in the locked both directions function to hold this in place so it's not flopping around in our way. These holes are very close to lined up, but a little bit off because I drilled all the way through the door to get to them. So we'll clean them up a little bit. Like so. So I'm going to put the screws all the way through. Now we can see through, or on the other side of the door, and get the screws to line it.
I got the slam.
Install these little caps. Alright, so I got that little bit of a flange ground down, and I think that was largely because of the application in this style door with this panel, the way I had to fudge it around to get it to fit. I don't think that was a manufacturer's thing. I think that was just the nature of this particular application that made it hang up a little bit. I was able to file that down, and it now works very, very smoothly. Alright, and then before we flip the door over and clean up the installation with these screws on the other side, I'm just going to put a quick bead of caulk around this. Don't laugh. I'm a carpenter, not a weatherproofer. Alright, so we flip the door back over and you can see from this side that these screws that were provided are too long. And part of that is because of how the way we cut this out into the panel. These two halves are much closer together than they ordinarily would have been. Plus, you never know. You could be putting this in a commercial door, which is 3/8 of an inch thicker than a residential door. So these screws are probably going to be too long to begin with. So we'll get down in here with a little pair of wire cutters. Let's see if we can't cut these off to length. So another option for cutting these shorter, since it's kind of hard to get down in there and get these cut so that they're short enough, a lot of times wire strippers will have screw cutters. This happens to be an 832 thread, so you pass it through on the threaded side. Extend it out the back as short as you want this to be cut. And that'll cut the screw. And as it comes back out, it cleans up the threads so that it won't be hard to start once you get it back in here. So that's another option if you happen to have a set of wire cutters that have screw cutters on them. Okay, before we take everything inside, you'll remember that some of those screws for the door, screws to the door frame and hangs were stripped out. They were horribly stripped out. So I'm going to show you how to repair that. Two ways to do it. You can use toothpicks. I don't happen to have any toothpicks. That's the easiest thing for you to get. I happen to have a bunch of these door shims used for setting door frames or even windows, depending on the application. And these work just as well. You can take a sharp chisel, you can take a knife, whatever you need to, and very carefully split these into thin pieces. Just like that. Ta-da. Alright, so since these screw holes are blown out, these screws are long enough, I actually was going all the way into the stud and they're still too blown out to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these strips that we made. Again, you can use toothpicks just as well. Dip them in a little wood glue here. Whoa, hey, ho, ho, hey. Out of control, out of control. Get them in the hole, tap it in, and break it off. A little more glue. And tap them nice and flat. We'll do that and all the screw holes for all the hinges. Alright, so we've got our door back downstairs. We've got the doggy doors installed. We've fixed the holes for the hinge screws. We're ready to swing this door. Again, if we'd taken this down by pulling the pins out, we'd have to hold it up and align this hinge flap perfectly and try to get the pin through it. It's not that hard. But I find it a lot easier just to pull the screws out. So what we'll do, we'll lift the door up, get the hinge in its bed, so that at least one screw lines up. Okay, get it started. Grab another screw. Push the door up till it lines up with the hinge bed. That screw in. These should pull in nice and tight now that we filled in those stripped out screw holes. And last but not least, we'll get the bottom one. Make sure the hinges are pulled all the way into the hinge beds. They're not sticking outside of the mortise for the hinges, or the door won't close right. Give the door a test swing. Closes and latches. Down here at the doggy door. Put it in the release position. Just the way it's supposed to. Alright, well I hope everybody enjoyed today's video installing the Pet Shop brand 4-way locking pet door to go into a traditional residential door. I had a few quirks working with the panel itself and working around the style, but it all worked out pretty well, I think. Hope everybody enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative. Hope everybody has an awesome and blessed day. I know I am, and I'll see you in the next one.